This week in 1911, a deadly fire swept through the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory in New York. We recently spoke with Rose Friedman, the last survivor of this tragedy, just weeks before she passed away at the age of 107. In one of her final interviews, she remembered an indelible moment of personal terror that became a pivotal event in the history of American labor. March 26, 1911. New Yorkers line up to identify 146 bodies, desperately trying to make sense of one of the greatest industrial catastrophes in the history of the United States. 107-year-old Rose Friedman was 2 days shy of her 18th birthday when she escaped the deadly flames.
I survived because I'm strong. I must say it myself. I know I can do it.
The infamous Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire would provoke nationwide changes in workplace safety regulations, still in effect today. When Rose immigrated to the United States from Austria in 1909, she joined waves of Jewish and Italian immigrants that were crowding into large cities in the early 20th century. Desperate to survive, they endured grueling exploitation in factories and sweatshops. In New York City alone, 250,000 men, women, and children labored 11 hours a day, 6 days a week, in fiercely competitive, dehumanizing, and dangerous conditions.
There simply were not adequate protections for workers in almost any kind of factory building. People understood what was needed to protect workers, but they weighed the cost of protection against the profits of whatever the manufacturing establishment was.
However, organizations like the International Ladies Garment Workers Union were fighting back, demanding better work conditions. In 1909, a major strike finally succeeded in getting some of the workers' demands met. Over 300 factories settled with the workers, but the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, which occupied the 8th, 9th, and 10th floors of the Ash Building, refused to change their policies. Like many proprietors, those at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory feared the expansion of the union and were suspicious of workers running off to secret meetings. It is alleged that many of the factory doors were locked to prevent workers from attending meetings, taking breaks, or from stealing material. March 25th, 1911. Near closing time that Saturday afternoon, it is believed a cigarette was dropped on the 8th floor of the factory, igniting pieces of fabric that had piled up. Rose and close to 200 other women on the 9th floor were trapped.
We didn't hear anything or anybody coming telling us that something is wrong in the building. But we start to smell smoke. And then it became a big panic. Everybody was running to the door, but the door was locked.
Some jumped into the elevator shaft, hoping to hitch a ride to safety, but it merely became an incinerator. The fire escape was their last hope.
Everybody was running towards the fire escape. It was overloaded.
That fire escape buckled very quickly into the fire, and people clinging to it crashed down and died.
On the street below, pedestrians noticed smoke billowing from the building. Bystanders watched bolts of cloth fly out the window with great speed, striking the pavement with a thud. They moved in closer and watched in horror, realizing the bolts of cloth were actually teenage girls jumping to their deaths, chased by the growing flames.
I figured in my mind, I'm not going to the fire escape. I'm going to go a floor up to see what the executives are doing.
The factory executives managed to escape, having received an early warning call from the 8th floor. In the panic, no one bothered to notify the workers on the 9th floor.
When I came to the 10th floor, the flames were over the stairs, and I didn't know how I could make it, but I can't go back either. So I took my skirt over my head, and I made it.
Fire engines 72 and 33 arrived quickly, but were hindered by the bodies on the street. To add to the already bleak situation, The water streams from the hoses and the truck's tallest ladders could only reach the 7th floor. Some firemen managed to climb to the top of the building next door in an effort to save those few who had made it to the rooftop. Rose was one of the last to escape through the roof. There, she was helped by 2 firemen to climb over to the adjacent rooftop and made her way down to safety.
I had to walk down 10 floors down by myself, and I stopped on every floor and cried. When I came to the street, I seen my father. But when he seen me, he couldn't believe his eyes, and he fainted.
In half an hour, firefighters managed to get the blaze under control. That night, the 26th Street Pier became a makeshift morgue for 146 corpses. 2,000 people searched for their loved ones. It took a full week to identify the dead. The owners of the factory were indicted for manslaughter by mid-April, but they denied any wrongdoing, claiming their factory complied with fire laws and had passed inspections. On April 25, 1911, 100,000 workers marched in the rain in mourning for the victims. An additional 400,000 people looked on.
Rose Schneiderman, who was one of the trade union organizers of the period, said at the funeral, "I would be a traitor to these poor burned bodies if I allowed their voices to be silenced."
Seizing on the public outcry, the unions gained political strength. Before the fire, the state government believed it had no power to legislate business. In the summer of 1911, the New York Factory Investigating Commission was formed to tour the factories, interview employees, and to hold public hearings. 8 months after the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, the owners, Max Blank and Isaac Harris, went on trial. Over 150 witnesses testified to the appalling conditions that led to this tragedy.
One day, one of the relatives or owners approached me because the case was going on in court. And they asked me to say that the doors were open. I said, "My dear man, why would I lie? The doors were locked. Otherwise, the people could save their life." He wanted to bribe me, but nothing done.
The jury acquitted Harris and Blank of all charges on December 27, 1911. Since it could not be proven they knew the doors were locked at the time of the fire. However, the tragedy did lead to major changes. 4 years after beginning its work, the New York State Factory Investigating Commission made 60 recommendations regarding working conditions and fire precautions.
Among these were fire prevention laws, that is, the insistence that buildings, for example, have sprinklers, have clear paths to exits, have windows that are wired with glass.
By the 1930s, Franklin Delano Roosevelt's administration had established national workplace safety measures. These were the forerunners to the current codes of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration.
I think one of the things we remember when we remember the Triangle Fire is that the struggle for better working conditions goes on not simply in New York, but throughout the United States and beyond American borders, following the garment industry wherever it goes.
The Triangle Shirtwaist tragedy is remembered every year on the fire's anniversary with the tribute in front of the former Ash Building. It is a time to honor those who died and those who survived.
I believe in myself. Everybody should believe in himself. And the most important thing, you must get respect.
Rose Friedman did not return to factory work after the fire. She went on to study accounting. However, throughout her life, she always championed the cause of worker safety.
She was a remarkable woman. Had she lived, she would have been 108 years old this week. We were lucky to get one of her last interviews.
Indeed. Well, now it is time for our